Hello, I'm Harry Riley. Welcome to Harry's 10-Minute Tales. This is called Lucky and the Missing Model Wife, Part 2. With clarity gradually returning to his shocked senses, Lucky scrambled about in the darkness, hunting for his pocket torch. Then, as he pointed the narrow beam through the newly discovered doorway, he drank in a grotesque sight. Lined up in the secret room facing him were 4 wooden chairs, and in each one slumped the figure of an adult male. Their mouths were agape, showing far too many teeth, almost as if they had died laughing. Dressed in clothes too large for their emaciated bodies, he knew they were incapable of speech. All 4 were in various stages of decomposition. Strong cords bound skeletal arms and legs to their death chairs, and each one had an enlarged, smiling colour print of himself, pinned to his chest by the thin blade of an ornamental dagger. The photographs must have been taken in happier times, because the men were shown dancing cheek to cheek with the same sparkling, leggy blonde. Covering his mouth to stop himself gagging, Osborn moved closer to peer at one of the bodies. He recognised the face in this photo as that of a celebrity tennis star who'd vanished a year ago. His picture had been splashed all over the front cover of the tabloids. The detective now thought he had a motive for the husband killing these men and guessed the reason for their deaths. Being away from home, pursuing his legal practice for much of the time, the lawyer would have become insanely jealous of his wife's affections being stolen from him by these young charmers. The entrancing female in the photographs was Alison, Lord Gauntly's missing model wife. Osborn already had her picture in his jacket, the print being removed from a gilt frame in the house. This, then, had been the barrister's fiendish retribution. He'd lured her lovers down to the manor on some pretext and then drugged his victims before lashing them down and administering the final death wound with a single blade thrust through the heart. Osborn reflected on the sheer horror of these victims, perhaps waking to find they had been tricked and drugged and were going to die anyway. Desperate to get out of this grisly house of horror, Lucky scooped up the cat and left the rooms, carefully closing both doors behind him and leaving the west wing by the way he had entered. He was pleased to see the window closed okay, showing little outward signs of the casement ever being disturbed. Sooner or later his intrusion could be discovered, but until such time he would carry on with his assignment, as though nothing untoward had happened. Bright sunlight and fresh clean air lifted the detective's spirits somewhat as he arrived at the Broad Mills narrowboat marina near Leeds, where they also hired out authentic Romany living vans. He was informed he could hire one of these gaily painted gypsy caravans by the week or month, together with a sturdy pony to pull it. Making arrangements to charge the bill to his client's bank, Osborn agreed to leave his own car as deposit in their lockable compound until his return. The marina's owner was an amiable chap, and over a couple of hours Lucky was able to pick his brains, saying, "I've taken extended leave from work and I'm tracing my Irish family tree connections. Are there any gypsy gatherings in this country where a traveller might be making for?" Scratching his head, the bewhiskered proprietor's face suddenly lit up. "Aye, lad, you'll be heading for the Appleby Horse Fair in Westmoreland, first week of June in that case. Thousands turn up, and you'll find out all about your forebears there." This sounded good advice, and so with all financials cleared and caravan, horse and haulage explained, Osborn and Blackie set off on yet another adventure, a journey that was to be both enjoyable and frustratingly slow as they headed for Cumbria. On the way north, through the winding lanes, of the scenic Yorkshire Dales, they met up with several travellers and shared many good moments with other road folk, but still there was no sign of the missing wife. It was not until he had joined a large encampment in the lush Headon Valley, south of Appleby, and just one amongst hundreds of other waggoners, that Osborn thought he would stand a chance of locating his prize. He felt sure the beautiful blonde would stand out like a beacon amongst this fraternity. The travellers appeared to be a very broad church, with many nationalities present, speaking in a wide variety of tongues. It was time to get busy. Unhitching Zelda, his black and white horse, from the waggon, Osborn allowed it to graze with other ponies by a stream, and he now stood chatting to a group of Irish gypsies. Dressed in cord trousers, bright neckerchief, and old waistcoat, the unshaven detective blended in suitably with the other visitors. Have any of you seen my girlfriend? She's coming with her brother in a bow tie, and has agreed to meet me here. He produced a spectacular photograph of the long-haired Lady Gauntly, in casual summer blouse and slacks, that he had filched from the picture frame in the manor, and passed it around. Almost immediately he struck gold, when a young fellow pointed his finger at the colour print and said he'd spotted her on the journey. Yeah, I saw her as we were passing through Kirkby Stephen. I called out to her, and she smiled back, though the guy she was with had his arm around her waist, in a very possessive manner. The gypsy eyed Osborn suspiciously. She's a real flower. You sure she's your woman? That night Blackie seemed unusually restless, and disturbed his master's sleep by licking his ear. Seconds later a knife was scraping at the Irishman's throat, and a harsh voice was demanding to know who he was. You've been asking too many questions, friend. Tell me your business, or you're a dead 'un. Seconds later the threatening intruder had abandoned his knife and was rolling about on the floor, desperately trying to save his eyes from being ripped out of their sockets by a ferocious animal. Call it off. Have mercy, for pity's sake. I meant you no harm. The wildcat had lunged at him from the darkness, already drawing blood from nose and chin. And now, fully awake, the detective pulled off his little tiger and switched on the powerful battery lamp to illuminate the cramped waggon. His would-be attacker sat cowering in a corner, trying to staunch the free-flowing blood from his damaged face, self-preservation to the fore, and all thoughts of violence long gone. Still holding the hissing Blackie, Osborn began his questioning. Are you the man who's enticed Lady Gauntly away from her husband? The gypsy nodded and cursed his ill luck. Yes, and she's caused me more trouble than I bargained for. Alison is a witch, and you can have her. Do what you like with her. She does nothing but moan all day long, ranting on about her comforts and fine life. I'll tell you, I'll be glad to be rid of her and on my own again. This was too good to be true, and going to make Osborn's job much simpler. So, after explaining his mission, he followed the gypsy back to his own bow-top waggon, where they both confronted the promiscuous woman. The pretty blonde-haired wife became tearful, and assured Lucky she wanted nothing more to do with the open road, and that it had all been a terrible mistake, pleading, I'd like to return to Granville, if only he would take me back. Lucky assured her desperate husband had commissioned him for that very purpose, and that is what he now proposed to do. And so it was arranged that next day Osborn, Alison and the cat would set off on their return journey to Gauntly Manor, picking up his car at Broadmoor's Marina on the way. In the meantime the detective had a couple of phone calls to make, one to Lord Gauntly to say mission accomplished, and the other to Chief Inspector Andy Walker to meet them back at the manor. Alison Gauntly was not very communicative with the big Irishman on the long journey home, being too wrapped up in her own thoughts, and possibly concluding that trying to seduce the detective would be pointless. She did attempt to woo Blackie, though, receiving a very lacklustre response. Lord Gauntly was waiting to greet them at the manor, and made a great show of fussing over his estranged spouse. The husband seemed none the wiser for the detective's early intrusion into the West Wing. Over a lavish, welcome-home meal, the barrister was full of praise for Osborn, and wrote out an extremely generous cheque for services rendered. The hard-up detective, unused to so much heady wine, soon dropped his guard as the alcohol took effect. Alison went for a shower and left the two men talking. "You don't know how much it means to me, Osborn, to have her back where she belongs. I didn't tell you this before, but I fear for her sanity. She suffers from a chronic brain disorder and sacked her nurse while I was away in London. When I came back and found her gone, I suspected she'd stopped taking her medication, her daily medication. At least now I shall be able to keep an eye on her. Who knows what she could be capable of? Schizophrenics do not always see things as we do." This was too much for Osborn, who had intended to keep silent about the 4 dead bodies until he was well clear, and let the police handle it in their own way. "You mean to say you've never seen the 4 dead men in the West Wing? I'm sorry, I just don't believe you. I think you killed them out of pure jealous." As he spoke, Lucky was already feeling groggy, and the word jealousy refused to form. He woke up to find himself bound hand and foot to a chair, back in that hideous room, now lit by several candles, alongside the other poor victims. The mirrored door was ajar, and he could hear Lord and Lady Gauntly's raised voices, arguing fiercely over his fate. Suddenly a fatal scream erupted from the husband, followed by a dull thud, and Alison emerged, wild-eyed, and a blood-soaked dagger held in her right hand. She wore a crazed look of demonic hate, and all Osborn could do was to struggle helplessly against his bonds. He realised he'd been wrong about the husband. He'd been the poor dupe whose only crime had been to try and cover up her murderous actions. Moments from death himself, the detective yelled out, "Alison, stop! It's all over, the police are here." Later, over a pint in their local, Chief Inspector Andy Walker explained to a grateful Osborn how he'd eventually arrived at the manor, following the detective's phone call. "We were delayed on urgent business and thought the place deserted. So, after ringing the doorbell and getting no answer, we were about to leave, when I spotted a dark cat sitting bolt upright in the middle of the drive, blocking our exit. Recognising the intelligent little animal as your Blackie, I ordered the men to join me, and we all followed the clever Moggy to the West Wing, where we found the door wide open. And then, hearing 2 people screaming at one another, we charged in. Just too late to stop Alison killing her husband, but thankfully apprehending her before she managed to do you in as well. She will never face trial for her crimes, and will be locked away in a secure institution for the rest of her life. You want to look after that little saviour of yours. He's worth a fortune. You really are born lucky." End.